And I'm going to make Seamus you can share his screen.
Oh, that's awesome.
Make you the co-host. Aloha, everyone. Welcome to another forum. I should put my video on. Here I am. Maybe the last time from my office at the McKay Foyer, sadly. As many of you may know, our foyer has some structural damage to it that is going to require it to be shut down for a few years. So it's really sad. Really grateful to have Seamus with us today. Seamus is been a long time friend and partner of our Peacebuilding program while holding down a full-time job running all of the talent and HR and training for the Polynesian Cultural Center. He's created a really awesome class for us called Establishing Peace that really thinks about the foundational cultural principles that undergird why peace building here in Hawaii and BYU Hawaii and in LIEA in particular. But he's also an expert in organizational behavior and organizational culture. And together we've created with Seamus's leadership and direction a really cool training program at the Polynesian Cultural Center. It brings a lot of peace building principles, but does it under the auspice of using cultural principles from the 7 cultures that are at the Polynesian Cultural Center. And Seamus is just an amazing human being. And so I'm going to toss it over to Seamus. He's going to talk a little bit about the work that he does in peace building, and then we're going to leave plenty of time for questions. You can put your questions in the chat session here for Seamus, and Seamus, I'll try to monitor those questions and let you know when they're happening, as well as if you're following on Facebook Live, just put your questions in there and I'll be checking that page as well. But we'll start with just tossing it to Seamus, and you're ready to go, brother.
Awesome. Always appreciate you, Chair. Thank you. You say too many kind words about me, but I'm thankful to be here with you all today and really blessed to be a part of the McKay Centre for International Peace Building. It's truly blessed my life and my families. And as I'm going to try and share with you today in the next 20 minutes, how it's blessed the Polynesian Cultural Centre. I know many of you are going to be wondering, how can I apply what I'm learning in my classes into my career? Will it even help open any doors for me? Or can it be of any sort of influence for good in organizations where I'm going to be working? And I'm going to take you on a quick journey. I'm going to share my screen. I really don't like looking at my face on the screen here. But, I'll share my screen and hopefully you guys can follow along, and I'll take you just on this quick journey to the Cultural Centre and peace building, what we've done here. So let me go to here. I'm going to turn that on. Oh, hold on. Just see the screen at the bottom right first. Do that. And should be here. How's that? Everyone see that? Yeah?
Yes, I see it.
Okay.
It's a little dark, but I see it.
Okay. All right, I see it. Okay. So I was asked to talk on organizational peace building and culture in peace building. I'll try and get as much as I can out there in these next 20 minutes, and ultimately I'm focusing on the Polynesian Cultural Centre and what we've done over here. So my role here, I'm the Director of Talent Management. I wasn't always the Director of Talent Management. I was actually the manager of the Māori village many moons ago, and we were having some significant issues with just basic unity. And a good friend of mine, Tim Makako, encouraged me as the manager to invite Chad to come into the Māori village and take us through an anatomy of peace training. And like ton of bricks, I guess.
Yeah.
And like Chad shared many times in his lectures,
Okay. Ready? Okay.
Is there someone else here? Hold on.
I think I got the mute on.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Hopefully it wasn't my family. I apologize if it was. But in the Māori village, we took the principles that Chad had taught us, and like he shared, all over the world, people can resonate and basically identify with the values that we learn and the principles that we learn through Avenger, and identify with it and own it. Like, this is what it is for us in Israel. This is what it is for us in on the East Coast and within our culture of South America, wherever these values are shared. And that's exactly what my experience was. As Chad was speaking, I could literally hear my ancestors and their way of being, their way of seeing people. And so we implemented some of these trainings and the values in the Māori village. In 2013, I was promoted to the director of the island. We implemented trainings there, and then I came into this role in 2015. Director of Talent Management, which basically means I do the onboarding, the recruiting, the orientation, the training of new employees. At the cultural centre, we do all of the leadership development, corporate trainings, as well as just basic talent management. If someone's got a concern, maybe their manager's not listening to them, maybe they have a concern even with their wages, they can come and talk to me. And so that's my role here at PCC. And as you know, I lecture at BYU. I did multi-language for many years and now in international peacebuilding. And like I mentioned, we did our Ohana training in 2015. Now, PCC is world renowned, and here's just a glimpse at some of the awards the Cultural Centre has received. And you know, if you go on TripAdvisor, we're 4.5 stars now. There's over 9,000 reviews. This is an old stat here, 2015. We've been the #1 attraction in Hawaii for decades, and the #1 cultural theme park in the world. But to get to these results, it's not easy. There's lots of work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of culture involved. Now, let me just share with you a quick quote, and we use this all the time here at the centre. Every organisation has a culture, either by design or default. The greatest threat to our organisation will not come from a frontal assault on our values, but the insidious decline of our culture. Now, I first heard this quote in 2015 at the Disney Institute. And I remember sitting there thinking, what is Walt Disney doing talking about culture? We've got nothing to do with culture. We're culture. We're the Polynesian Cultural Centre. But I understand now through learning more about organizational behavior, organizational development, what he's referring to. We wanted as the PCC to be very deliberate in our culture. So let me just quickly take you through this next, how companies see culture. This is called the STAR model, and we use it here at PCC even prior to us using Avenger values and principles. So basically, every company starts with a vision. PCC, we've got a mission statement, we've got core directives, our goals, and then you put a structure around that and make sure the structure can cope with the vision and can fulfill the vision. You don't want to be too complicated or not enough people or so forth. Then for that structure, you put in place processes. And with those processes, you need to have a reward system. And then, of course, the most important element, then you need to get the right people. And this is how companies like PCC view culture. It's everything that we're about. It's how we do this, how we communicate, how we hire, how we fire, how we promote, what sort of people we need and how we need to train them. From there comes companies' results. Now, let me share with you how we define culture, though, at PCC specifically. You may recognize some of this wording, but we define culture as the lens through which we see the world. It's the lens through which we see and understand each other. If we believe that if we have the right culture, which comes from how we see, that's going to dictate what we believe. What we believe becomes what we value. What we value becomes our actions and therefore our traditions and our culture. But it starts with the lens that we see. And as Polynesians, at the Polynesian Cultural Centre, we do have a very unique lens, how we see each other, how we see the world, and how we interact with it. So here's the next quote I want to share with you. Hold on, what's happening? There's a famous quote from a Fijian Ratu. The highest ranking chief in Fiji right now is a man named Ratu Mano Rasingatale. And this is how he defined culture. Culture is much more than the performance of traditional ceremonies. It is the sum total of the people's way of life as it is lived every day. It is a bond which binds their hearts to live and work together. The unseen spiritual things which money cannot buy. I love this quote. I love that it is from a Fijian too, because a lot of Fijians I know love ceremonies. But he's saying here that much more than ceremonies, our culture is the unseen spiritual things. Money can't buy it, but it bonds and binds people together. So straight away when I read this, I think Ratu Mano understands there's something deeper than behavior. And everything that we do, there's something underlying it. And our company understands that now. We also understand that we've always known this because our ancestors always had what Hawaiian people call kauna. There's something deeper than the hula. There's something deeper than the haka you're watching. There's something deeper than just a carved figure. That means more to us. So it makes sense. There's something deeper than how I'm treating you. My habits, my behavior. I can do it in one of two ways. So as a cultural centre, a discussion question is what drives results? And we took the ideas from Avenger, that we understand our current results come from our behaviours, these processes, these structures that we have. And most organisations, if you want to move to new results, we push across that behaviour. And PCC have done that for many decades. We push the behaviour, we change the habit, we change the program we're using, we change the evaluation we're using, we change the employee surveys. And what normally happens though, that will work for a little while, but ultimately it will end up going back to what we're used to doing because it's driven by our mindset. So at PCC, through learning these Avenger principles, we took the ideas from the pyramid, changing the behavior pyramid, and we moved our mindset. So 2015, with Chad and David and Shemaya and a bunch of us, we looked at the goals of the cultural centre. And I should probably put this picture on here, but understanding the golden egg as our results, but without the goose, which is our employees and our organisation, our people, we ain't going to get those golden eggs. And we laid the foundation for our mindset we took all these ideas from Arbinger and we talked about how do you see Laie, which to help our organization know the power of how you see Laie dictates behavior. Therefore, how you see the cultural center dictates behavior as well. We talked about ancestors and recognizing there's something deeper than behavior. And we talked about the prophets that saw this place and how does it impact on us? What do we learn from that? Because ultimately the prophets see people. How do we see the cultural center? How do we see Ohana, see Aloha? How do we see the BYU Hawaii students? And how do we see Mana? This incorporated so much, and I know I'm going through this real fast, but hopefully you got questions and I can clarify things. But we try to lay the foundation for our organization by setting the mindset of our organization first. The behaviors that followed, just so you know, the behaviors that followed this was that we now have an organization that sets monthly goals, which wasn't happening before. We have one-on-one meetings, understanding that there are 3 motivators for every organization's success. Top 3 motivators. Number 1, number 3 is compensation that motivates people, but it isn't the top. The compensation basically keeps people at work, but it doesn't motivate them to work. The second highest thing that motivates employees is recognition. People want to be recognized for good work, which ultimately will impact also their compensation. But the number 1 motivator for organizations throughout the world, and this is from the Disney Institute, is appreciation, is feeling valued as an employee, as a person. So we implemented these daily or weekly one-on-one meetings so people feel that appreciation. You can have the open communication for recognition. Malama meetings are team meetings. Basically, we took the idea of Meet to Give from Arbinger and made a Malama meeting that happens each month. Daily prayer meetings, our online evaluations, our 90-day reviews, surveys, everything came, personal development plans, PDPs, all stemmed from this mindset that we had put in place. So I think I've done 20 minutes, Chad. I'm not sure, but I wanted to just, I wanted to make sure I left time for questions as well. But ultimately, the cultural center took the outward mindset, the anatomy of peace, and infused it with our own culture. You'll see, like I just mentioned, we don't call it Meet to Give. It's a Malama meeting or a Kukua meeting. And we infuse these values that are already in our culture. If I can just share one with you, under the Sea Ancestors, actually no, Sea Prophets, I'll use Sea Prophets as an example. We take the Tongan value of Tauhi Va. Tauhi means to nurture and nourish, care for, and look after. Va, which is the space between people that exist. To look after that, to be responsible for another person and how they feel, how they are responding, how they are producing, being responsible for that between a manager and an employee. And I remember sharing this training for the very first time and having an employee come to my office right after, closed the door and she walked inside, and I thought, this behavior is not normal. I'm not used to seeing this happen right now, but how it was. She closed the door, she walked in, and she said to me, Seamus, I've come here to let you know that I have vākovi. Vākovi means I'm worth nothing to her. And my heart leapt for joy, because I knew she had come to fix it. And we had a wonderful experience of to fix this space between us. And my relationship still to this day with her, because of the mana, the power that she had to come and actually practice the behavior. One thing that I had been weak at doing, that I avoided conflict, not knowing though this little conflict was going to eventually bring peace, which it did. And that's taking a value from Polynesian culture, Tongan people, their history, and putting it into with the ideas that come to have one-on-one meetings with people and literally ask, how do I help you in your journey in life? What can I do to lift your burdens? What can I take off your plate? And what can I do to help you be successful? And this only works if the mindset is first established, which is what we did in 2015. So basically, all I'm sharing with you is that the ideas that you're learning are very valuable, and I know that every organization in the world is starving for it. Sometimes they don't even know they need it, but they do. And what you're learning is very valuable to not only fulfill David McKay's vision, but also to help make the world a better place, help make organizations more effective, more efficient. And I could put up right now for you to show, actually, I might just, I won't, but I can show you the numbers of employee satisfaction that's come into the cultural center and how that's impacted on the results. The last 3 years before COVID was the best 3 years in the history of the Polynesian Cultural Center. We're almost 60 years old. The best 3. Hands down, no years have been as good as the last 3 that we've had financially, which has made us able to survive COVID and keep our employees employed and help them as much as we can to be ready to come back when we eventually open. But this is some of the results of what you can do as a peace builder, and taking the values and implementing them into your homes and organizations, communities. Okay, I'm going to stop there, Chad. Sorry.
That's great. And you look, one of the reasons that they have Seamus on, obviously you can see the spirit he brings into every presentation and how awesome that is. But I think a lot of times our students are thinking like, okay, peace building is about being a diplomat. It's like, working in mediation across countries, or they think about it a lot of times at the family level and, okay, I'm going to be mediating between spouses or between parents and children. And I think sometimes we overlook this very big area where there are, 1, a lot of jobs, 2, there's a lot of need. And when Seamus talks about it, I hope that you see that also that there's a lot of impact. And the impact just isn't on the fact that the organization can make more money or have more customers, though that's part of it. The impact goes all the way to employee satisfaction, how people feel about their job and how good they feel about their job. 2, because Seamus has incorporated these sorts of principles, it doesn't just help you with your job. Seamus has told me stories about employees that it's helped them with their marriages or, work at home or in the community, because as they're applying these principles at their job, they're also applying these principles at home or in other aspects of their life, to the impact that it has on customers. The Polynesian Cultural Center is unique in that it has a mission that's geared towards doing something to our customer, not just getting their money, but moving them in some ways to think about their relationships to each other, their relationships to their own culture, and what have you. And when that has an impact, it has a ripple effect. And so, you might think about, look, I'm an international mediator, and I work with, maybe in a given year, several hundred people, that I'm interacting with. The Polynesian Cultural Center has more than 1 million people that come through its park is that right? Over 1 million every year.
So right now, we've had over 50 million people come to the Simply Open.
Yeah. And in an average year, what do you have, not counting COVID?
In just the islands, around about 800,000. But when you add the marketplace in, 1.2 million every year.
Yeah. And so think about what Seamus is doing. It not only impacts how many full-time employees before COVID?
1,400.
1,400. How many part-time employees?
1,100. So 800 students, 850, 900 students, and then another 200, 250 part-time community, 250 full-time.
So you've got 2,500 employees. You have 800,000 to 1.2 million customers coming through. I mean, just think about the scope of that impact that you can have in positions like this. And so, traditionally, what Seamus does comes out of an HR function, out of a lot of organizations, but most large organizations have an HR team, including trainers that are coming in and doing cultural work and cultural training within the organization. And not only is this a great career path and a job path for many of our students, I always want people to understand the impact that people like Seamus have in actually teaching these principles. And it filtered all the way into the show, right? When they do the canoe show, stuff that we were working on actually filtered into like dancing and what they were doing, in the shows. In teaching the customers that are there about, the principles as well as the night show. And so, I mean, just what a profound impact this sort of work can have, and something that I think more of our students should be like alive to and interested in, and one of those career paths that it's a very clear path that you can get into HR and working on training and working in these areas. So with that said, I want to open it up for questions. I can't quite see everybody. I might be able to see everybody. So if you have a question, you can either just sort of raise your hand, or feel free to throw it into the chat session, either on Facebook or what have you. Whatever you have for Seamus about careers in this area, what he does specifically, or if you have specific questions about the Polynesian Cultural Center or the training that they do, I'm sure he's happy to answer those as well. Don't be shy.
I think one thing I can share is that one of our trainers, Willie Talanoa, came from International Peacebuilding as a major, came to the Cultural Centre. The student trainer position in PCC is one of the most popular jobs. When their role comes up, we will never have less than 25 to 40 students apply. And the interviews get pretty intense. Billy had just graduated and was coming in for an AT, and we use matrices. We invented the matrix since I've been here, using our values and principles and these sea ancestors, and we use that so there's no bias. So I can't say, I know Billy, I'm going to hire him. It has to be a panel. Billy dominated that interview process when he came through, based on what he had learnt as a facilitator and taking the courses of Harvard. Part of our interview process and everything at PCC, there's auditions, and so we audition them on the spot, stand up and train us for 2 minutes on it. Here's a topic. He doesn't even know what the topic is, but he already was incorporating the values that he'd learned and principles that he understood. And those are skills you're learning right now in the major. So it can help you in your jobs, and not to be afraid to tell people that I've taken the mediation classes. I've taken these courses and share that I imagine peace builder. You never would want to be shy of being a peace builder, because every organization in the world needs to have some form of conflict resolution and people who can facilitate that. Every organization in the world looks for mediators, and most times they hire from outside. But if they know you are one, that's going to only be in your benefit.
One of my favorite stories along that lines was when our career services several years ago, when we just started our program, went to China. And they basically looked at us and said, you know, we're not even going to mention peace building in China. I mean, nobody knows what this is. It's not going to work. And, you know, and I had a conversation with them. I'm like, okay, sometimes we have to change our terminology around a little bit, but think about conflict resolution and think about what managers have to do every day with their employees. Whenever employees have issues with either management or with each other or with customers, right? Who's equipped to do that? And our students are going to come almost overqualified in many ways, that we're thinking about such complex disputes often in our major, that they're going to come overqualified for the day-to-day sort of stuff that is there. Talk that way and see how they respond. And it was amazing. They came back and they said, all of the companies that they talked to in China, they wanted those students. They said, look, we can train you on the basics of whatever it is that we do in our business. Like we can train you how to do that. But that skill is something that's so valuable to us that we'll hire you immediately. And we've had so many examples of our students who aren't just getting hired in entry-level jobs, but because they're carrying a certificate with them or what have you, they're moving up almost immediately into managerial positions because they carry with them a skill set that just many people don't get. We should be teaching it in elementary school and then in high school, and it should be mandatory in college as well. But as you know, the answer is that it isn't. And so it can be a valuable thing as you're thinking about your resume and putting it on a resume and talking about it. You just may have to reframe it sometimes a little differently. Peace building, for a lot of people, they won't quite understand that, but think about conflict resolution, negotiation, terms like that, and immediately people's ears are going to perk up. And there was a recent Stanford study of CEOs asking them what they thought the most important skill was that they could learn in their jobs. And over 60% of them put down conflict resolution as their number one skill. And so that's, that's pretty powerful stuff. Who's got questions for us? Come on, everybody. You don't just want to hear Seamus and I talk the whole time back and forth. We'll eventually talk about ginger beer and Whitaker's chocolate, and it's just going to go down from there. So,
are there a lot of like diplomatic job positions?
On the diplomacy side?
Yeah, like with this major.
There are, again, every country will have essentially some equivalent of a State Department, and that State Department is essentially where the diplomacy happens. And for some countries, especially in the Pacific, it's a major employer for the entire nation, and the government might be. In the U.S., it would be through the U.S. State Department, and we're actually going to have a forum on that towards the end of the semester and get into all the details of, if you're interested in foreign service, what that looks like, how to get a job with the State Department, how to ultimately work for an embassy or in a consulate, doing sort of diplomatic work. And so I think that might be our last one of the semester, that we're going to dive into that in great detail. But yes, there's jobs there. They're good jobs as well. It's very competitive, just to be honest. But we had we've had all of our students that have wanted to do it have made it, and several of them are thriving. We have a student that's in China right now, in an embassy in China. We have another one who's in the Philippines right now, working out of the Philippines in a State Department role. And so, yeah, that's a great option. And peace building is a great great way to get into that, especially if you want to work on public diplomacy work. Questions for Seamus about organizational work? Seamus, we may get to end early today. he's all right with that. Any last questions before we bounce out today? Again, I just want to reiterate, first I want to thank Seamus for coming with us. I want to reiterate that those, interestingly, for those of you that have read Anatomy of Peace in our 121 class, or if you take his 221 class on establishing peace, you'll read Outward Mindset. Arbinger is primarily an organizational behavior organization. Most of their work, the vast majority of their work is with organizations. And so this is, again, a very big market. There's good jobs, there's well-paying jobs that come out of this. And all of these principles that we often focus on our work on applying to family life, our personal life, and then sort of thinking about our communities, certainly apply to organizations as well. And I see that we've got some of our 121 students on here. And so I really recommend taking 221. It's kind of our next step after 121. That's why it's 121, 221. That's with Seamus. He's offering that again in, I think, winter semester, establishing peace. And you'll get into a lot more depth about how to take these principles, applying it to organizational training and culture. And he's also just a wonderful teacher and someone you'll love to get to know. And when the Polynesian Cultural Center opens back up, you'll be well equipped to come in and get a great job. Seamus, any closing words from you?
Thanks, Ted, and thank you, everybody. We've talked about things like conflict resolution in organizations. That's always a need. They're always looking for mediators and things of that nature. What you're always trying to do in looking for work is to set yourself apart, because you're going to go into organizations for looking for work where you've got a bachelor's degree and then someone else got a bachelor's degree. In fact, the 50 people that are sitting beside you have all got bachelor's degrees. So really what you're looking for things to make you stand out. And some things like what I think about is understanding the peace building principles, values, just the simple principles of SAM, right, that we talk about an outward mindset. See others as that first step, which we take for granted and we talk about all the time, but it's huge. That's the biggest part of things when it comes to working with people, is first of all, how do you see them, right? And then are you able to adjust how you then work with that person or with that department based on how you see them, and then measuring your impact. That simple model of SAM is huge at PCC for everyday work. One of my roles is investigating, and it's not the best role. It's actually one that I don't like doing, but this isn't necessarily going and actually stopping a conflict, but I've got to investigate theft, sexual harassment. I've got to investigate, and probably this year I've done maybe 3 or 4. It's a quiet year, right, because we're closed. But even in that, I appreciate understanding. First, I need to evaluate my own mindset before I go into it. I know a lot of the employees, especially all the full-timers. I've worked here since 1993, and I've always got to check my mindset at the door, or before I go into an interview, before I go in to investigate and ask questions. And that, to me now, is invaluable. That you can't just go in and say, here's the policy, here's the law, and I'm just going to get to the bottom of it right now. I don't care who I run over. And if this is true, it's done. That mindset is, you're basically going to start a conflict. But as HR, our role is not to start conflicts, is to resolve them and try and get to things. And what I've also found is that when I and I've checked my mindset, I normally get to the solution quicker, and I get to the results that are normally a bit more positive for those that are involved. So there's so many other ways that it helps, not just in the, there's a fight going on, I'm gonna go and fix this or help it or I try and resolve it. But anyway, take advantage of all of this and what you have, enjoy the journey and learn as much as you can and go and make the impact in the world that's so desperately needed right now. And help the presidents of the debate love each other.
Seamus. Next week, Bailey Rasmussen is coming on. Digital Peacebuilding. She just secured a full-time job. She's one of our alumni. She started her own company and was doing some consulting, and she did so well that several companies came after her. And so she's going to talk about everything from doing a nonprofit. She works with Peace Players and she's doing all their digital peace building work. And she's going to talk about it both from that using social media, as well as she's going to talk about the Commons Project, a project that she's worked on the last couple of years that was actually, a lot of it was instituted and created by another one of our alumni, Julie Hawk, which is actually mediating partisan political conflict online between Republicans and Democrats through something called the Commons Project. And so she's going to take this through several ways. One is the sort of work that you might do to promote peace building online just in general, and then a very specific project that she's worked on as well. She just graduated 2 years ago. She's doing really awesome stuff. She's got, she helped me with Dangerous Love as well and all of our social media. And I think you'll really enjoy her. And this by far is the biggest exploding area in peace building right now, especially with COVID and everything that happened. People had to figure out, how do we do this work online and through social media and Facebook and Zoom and everything else. And Bailey's going to come in and give you lots of cool ideas. And she's constantly teaching me every day. This is in many ways one way that she's my teacher. And I'm really excited to have her on next week. So come back and join us next week if you're interested in digital peace building. Thanks again, Seamus. Aloha. And we'll see you next week.